We're going to come into a lunge pose. If you need a cushion for your back and knee, you can take your blanket or towel and place it on your mat. So see if you can kneel so that you're not right on your kneecap, but you're just ahead of it. And then come back to all fours again and step my front foot forward, and then I'll come up to a lunge position. If you've done any yoga, this kind of lunge is probably familiar to you. This is called dragon pose in yin. Where we're searching for the stretch here, remember I said in yin, we're looking for the area of the stretch and we're adjusting our position just to get that stretch. So this stretch, and hopefully you already feel it already, is in the hip flexors, which are a group of 4 different muscles right around the front of your pelvis and all the way down into the quads. So although we want stillness in yin, we want to adjust the pose first that we make sure we feel the stretch. If you're not feeling the stretch here at all, you can slide your front foot forward a little bit, your back leg back a little bit, and see if having the back leg back further, because it's this extension of the back leg that brings that stretch, if that helps at all. Another thing you can do is you can lean your torso forward so that you're coming into a little bit of a forward fold, or you can lean it a little back, and I actually feel more back, but everyone's body is different, so you do what's right for you. Another option that I find that gives me more stretch is to lift the arm of the leg that's back and create a long length on this arm, and maybe even leaning over to the side. So you try these things and see, does this change the stretch for you? Does that give you the intensity of stretch that feels good, but again, without any of that painful, tight, stinging kind of sensation? Once you hold, it doesn't matter where your arms and legs are. Remember, functional yoga, it matters how it feels, not how it looks. Once you find the position that gives you that most stretch, that's when you start to get quiet in your body and hold. If anything is getting in the way, for example, if you feel too much compression here, then you can slide this foot out so that you're not feeling anything that is painful or just really uncomfortable that's taking away from the area that we're trying to get stretch. And we breathe in all of these poses. I didn't give a lot of breath instruction today, but always keep breathing, obviously. See if you can breathe in and out through your nose. And then moving with the next breath, we're going to come up and switch legs. I'm going to turn around so that you can see my back leg. You can face whatever way feels right for you. So whatever leg you didn't have forward, take the opposite leg forward. And then remember to first scooch the knee back a little bit so that you're more to the front of your kneecap. And then you have more extension. So if I was here, this leg right under my hip, I don't really feel anything now, any kind of stretch. You might, but you're not having that extension of the back leg. So we want to slide so we're getting some extension in the back leg. And that will actually help to get the stretch here. Remember that you can adjust. You can lean forward more. You can come more upright, push your hips forward more and see if that changes the stretch for you. Your arms are other kind of levers that you use to adjust the stretch. So most often I would say it's the arm of the same side of the leg that if you lean away or even lean a little bit forward, you get more of a stretch. You can certainly try it with the other arm. You might find that this way, that's where your stretch is. And so that's where we're looking for your stretch, right? Where you feel it the most. So find that place. If you have to adjust, sometimes you lose the stretch. You had it and then you lose it. So it's definitely okay to adjust. Find the stretch again and then try to settle into that. Finding a position you can hold that's comfortable. So not like, oh, we're doing 100% maximum, I can't hold this. Finding a position that is comfortable to hold, because that will help you stay for a little bit longer time. And we're almost done on this side. Tune into your breath as you start to move out of this pose, lifting yourself up. And I'm going to face you. And we're going to come to seated. When I'm seated, I like to sit on a little bit of something. So I'm going to take my towel and put it behind me just so that's right under my sits bones. And come to seated with both feet together, the soles of the feet together in a cobbler's pose, or in yin, this is called butterfly. I like to say that this is one of the poses of many names. Take a moment here. This is kind of a rebound after what we just did. You can flap your little butterfly wings a little bit. See how that feels. When we're doing functional yoga, we take these little breaks to check in with our body as to how it feels. And that helps guide us on what we need to do, what we need to adjust. So we're going to move into a pose called deer in yin yoga. Sometimes it's called 90-90, another pose of many names. So I'm going to keep one leg parallel, but roughly parallel. It doesn't have to be in this exact position, but one leg in front is externally rotated. So that's what we're looking for, this external rotation at the hip. Take the other leg behind me. I'm actually going to move the blanket out for this so that it's internally rotated at the hip. So you can see why this is called 90-90. But these angles don't have to be exact. So before we do anything else, if you're feeling like this is really awkward or uncomfortable, shift your body around. Remember, you can adjust. You can make these angles of the knee wider. You can bring the knees, the feet more close, so less of an angle. This is another stretch for the hip flexors, but it can also get into the muscles in the back. So we can adjust the stretch. Now sitting right here like this, I'm feeling it in my hip flexor, on this back leg. You can adjust and start to walk back on your hands and see if that draws more sensation into this section. So this is really giving me a nice stretch on the side of my hip, into my glute muscles. Anywhere around there is good, as long as it's that nice diffuse sensation, not sharp, not stinging, not overly uncomfortable, not uncomfortable to the point that it's unsustainable and painful. Another option is you can take your hands and start to walk them forward a bit, and then you can play around with where you go. If you walk your hands the side opposite where your back leg is, you might feel the stretch travel up into the side muscles of your back, the QL muscle. That's an important muscle for virtually everything. You can walk your hands over to the side and lean to one side and get a lateral stretch, stretching out some of those muscles of the intercostals, the side abdominal muscles, the obliques. I'm going to take it back to that little bit of leaning on my hands. I really like the stretching the hip flexor. So the muscles in here you might have heard of. There's the psoas. We actually have a psoas major and a psoas minor. There's the iliacus, which functions with the psoas. And then there's a big muscle called the sartorius, which goes all the way down and wraps around to the knee. As you settle into your pose, remember that we're attending to the sensation, the stretch, and attending to the breath. And then we're trying to find a place that feels comfortable that we can hold for a little bit of time. And if something isn't comfortable, we adjust. You can use many more props for a yin practice than I'm using. You can lean back on something. You can have your arms in a different position. Remember, it's where we place our torso, where we adjust our arms and our legs. That's how we adjust the pose in yin. So on your next breath, if you're leaning backward or forwards, come to upright. Use your hand to help you swing that back leg back around to front, coming into another butterfly shape. And maybe experimenting with a different position of your feet. So if you had them really tightly pulled into your body, see how it feels to pull your feet a little further away. taking a few breaths between sides to notice the effects, notice what you've done so far. And then we'll take the second leg so that it internally rotates, and that motion comes from your hip. So that's the area that we're trying to target, an area that in some of our sports activities can get overused, can need a little bit of attention. Slide the leg back so now you're pulling the leg away from the body as you're internally rotating it. Take it any amount away. It might be closer here. It might be more extended behind you. And the extension of the femur bone into the hip socket, that is what's going to create some of that feeling of stretch along the hip flexor muscles, those muscles I talked about on the other side. Maybe you feel this along into the front of your thigh, some of those muscles. You might even feel these adductors, these groin muscles on the inside, depending on your placement of your leg. And then remember, you can adjust your torso. You can go to either side. So leaning to the side, this is where I feel a lateral stretch, and it opens up the sides. I can even lean down further and get more of that stretch along these side abdominal muscles. You can try leaning toward the side of the leg. For me, that just creates compression. Here I am hitting flesh against flesh, and I'm not really getting a stretch. I'm losing the stretch that way. If I simply just adjust another way and see what happens if I go here. And when I go here, I find that I can get a stretch more into the glutes and the back. So less on the side part, the IT band, more into my glutes. Or I can stay upright and allow that stretch to stay more into my hip flexor. That's what I love about yin, is it's fully adjustable and customizable. In fact, I really believe that all yoga is like that. All yoga is intended to be adjusted to your body. You don't have to contort yourself into a certain shape that doesn't work for your body. The purpose of yoga is to make your body feel good. So why not allow yourself to take the variation of the pose that feels good in your body? That's simply, it makes sense to me. So a little bit longer on this side, adjusting. Remember, if you lose the sensation at any time, you can adjust a little bit, find the place where you have sensation, a good, comfortable sensation. If it builds up and becomes too intense, maybe at first it was very tolerable, but suddenly it does start to feel more sharp or uncomfortable, you simply adjust what you need to adjust to lessen the intensity of that stretch. All right, and when you're ready, use your hand to help that leg come back around. One last butterfly pose here. And so in butterfly pose, you can even lean forward a little bit. See if maybe that brings more of a stretch to your inner thighs. Maybe you feel it a little bit in the muscles of your back here. And our last seated pose is going to be a wide-legged seated pose. Take your legs out. And when I say wide, it's wide for you and for the function of the pose. We'll talk a little bit about that. So open my legs out. So this pose is Dragonfly in yin. You might know it as Uttanasana Konasana. Same pose. So here, when we abduct the legs, and that means opening the legs away from the body, we're trying to stretch the adductors. That's ADD. Those are the muscles on the inside, the groin muscles. And in this pose, we're also going to lean forward a little bit to get a stretch into the hamstrings. So those are the two target areas, the hamstrings and the adductors. And I can tell you, I'm already feeling mine here. If I lean forward, I definitely start to feel it more in the hamstrings. But sometimes I like to draw my legs a little bit back together because that can bring it more into the hamstrings for me. So that's the first thing that you look for, is the position of your legs without any pain. So if your knees are feeling uncomfortable, one option is to bend them a little bit. Another option is to take that rolled blanket or towel and support the knee. Take a look at your feet as well. You can allow your feet to roll out. to roll in, to just flop to wherever they feel good. Now, if you find that you can't get a stretch because leaning forward is really uncomfortable for you, this is where sitting up on something is really helpful. I'm going to sit up on this little bit of edge of blanket. And what that does is it allows my pelvis to tip forward a little bit more easily. So wow, now as I do that, I can tip forward a lot more and get more of a stretch in my hamstring. So if I'm trying to target the back of my legs, by sitting up on something, it allows me the ability to tip forward more. What you're doing is when we're sitting like flat on the floor like that, we're in an L. By sitting up on something, you're creating a greater angle. So you're giving your body more room to move, especially if your bones of your body get in the way as you try to lean forward. So see if you can find a position, and it may be leaning forward. Maybe you don't need to lean forward. Maybe you need to lean forward more to find the sensation for you. But remember that we're looking for sensation in those areas. And if you're a runner, if you've been seated all day with your knees bent, these stretches, these target areas might feel like they really need a little bit of effort to bring the water balance back to your tissues. What we're really doing in yin yoga is we're kind of getting away from the major muscle groups. Even though we're targeting those groups, we're not working those groups. I'm not working my hamstring. I'm targeting all the fascial tissue around my hamstring by just letting my hamstrings rest in this pose. So it's not an active hamstring strengthening move. And I didn't want to use a lot of props for this pose, but you can, or for this practice, you can use as many props as you want. Remember I said we want to be comfortable in the poses. So if this is like the place where you feel the stretch, but you don't want to lean on your hands or prop yourself up, you can be on a cushion, you can be on a chair and leaning your arms on a chair. So it doesn't matter what you do with the parts of the body that aren't involved in the stretch. They're just there to guide you and to help you in the pose. All right, let's go for just a few more breaths. Feel the shape of your body in these last few breaths. Feel how the pose is affecting your body. And then on your next breath, start to walk your hands in. Again, use your hands this time to help both legs in together. And you can take them out and shake them out in front of you. You can go back to a butterfly and flap. You can take a windshield wiper. Or you can take a still position and simply feel the effect of that pose.